She was born into one of America's richest dynasties, the daughter of a cereal empire and heir to a life of privilege. But Eleanor Post Close was never content with being just an heiress. Behind the pearls and private schools, she carried a quiet defiance, a will to live life on her own terms, even if it meant breaking the rules set for women like her. She eloped young, faced scandal in headlines, stood before royalty in London, and drifted through a string of marriages that promised stability but often delivered silence. From high society debuts to wartime Europe, from Hollywood scripts to Paris salons, Eleanor moved through the 20th century not as a bystander, but as a woman constantly reinventing herself in the shadows of enormous wealth. Her life wasn't loud, but it left echoes in fashion, in film, in the arts, and in the quiet courage of starting over. She was a survivor in silk gloves, a forgotten thread in the fabric of modern history. And now her story finally returns to the light, not for the headlines, but for the truth. Eleanor Post Close entered this vibrant yet turbulent world on December 3, 1909, in the affluent town of Greenwich, Connecticut. She was the second daughter of Edward Bennett Close, a savvy investment banker known for his sharp business acumen, and Marjorie Meriwether Post, the brilliant heiress who had inherited and expanded the Post cereal empire. Marjorie's father, C.W. Post, had revolutionized breakfast with inventions like postum, a coffee substitute, and grape nuts cereal, turning a small operation into the massive General Foods Corporation. This meant Eleanor grew up surrounded by wealth that came from something as everyday as what people ate in the morning, fortunes built on breakfast tables nationwide. But life wasn't all smooth sailing. Behind the grand facades of their family homes, there were cracks forming. Eleanor's parents divorced in 1917, when she was just 8 years old. This happened right in the midst of World War I, a time when the world felt unstable, with American soldiers heading overseas and families at home dealing with rationing and uncertainty. The divorce was amicable by standards of the day, but it left young Eleanor and her older sister Adelaide navigating a changing family dynamic. Marjorie didn't stay single long. In 1920, she married Edward Francis Hutton, a wealthy stockbroker who co-founded E.F. Hutton and Company. This union changed Eleanor's surname to Hutton, thrusting her even deeper into the elite circles of society. Growing up in this environment meant summers at sprawling estates like the original Hillwood on Long Island, where the air was filled with the scent of blooming gardens and the sounds of orchestral music at evening soirees. But it also meant high expectations. Eleanor attended prestigious finishing schools, the Spence School in Manhattan and Miss Porter's School in Farmington, Connecticut, where the curriculum focused more on etiquette, languages, and social graces than on academics or careers. These institutions were designed to prepare young women from wealthy families for roles as wives and hostesses, teaching them how to host dinners, converse with diplomats, and maintain poise under pressure. Yet even in this structured world, Eleanor developed a resilience that would define her. The era's chaos, from the suffrage movement empowering women to the looming stock market crash, shaped her into someone who craved stability but wasn't afraid to seek adventure and love amid the changes. Eleanor's life played out like chapters in a captivating book, each one mixing the sparkle of privilege with the grit of real human experiences. Her childhood was one of undeniable luxury, but it came with its own set of challenges. Born into the immense wealth of the Post cereal fortune, she grew up in an environment where opulence was everyday life. Yet the undercurrents of family dynamics added layers of complexity. As a little girl, she would roam the vast grounds of family properties, perhaps hiding in the hedges during garden parties, where adults discussed business deals and world events over champagne. One of the most iconic of these homes was the original Hillwood estate on Long Island, a sprawling mansion built between 1921 and 1929 in Brookville, New York, specifically for her mother Marjorie Meriwether Post and stepfather Edward F. Hutton. Designed by architect Charles Hart of the firm Hart and Shape, this Georgian-style manor sat on 176 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds, complete with manicured lawns that stretched out like green carpets, stables filled with purebred horses for riding lessons and polo matches, and grand rooms adorned with antique furniture that hinted at the family's growing interest in art and history. The estate featured formal gardens inspired by European designs with fountains, rose arbors, and even a private golf course where family and guests could while away afternoons. Inside, the halls echoed with the sounds of servants preparing elaborate meals, and young Eleanor might have peeked into the library or drawing rooms, where her mother collected early pieces of what would become a world-renowned art collection. Summers there meant lazy afternoons by the sea, with the salty breeze from nearby Long Island Sound carrying the laughter of children playing croquet or tennis on the private courts, but also overhearing whispers of adult secrets, like the tensions in her parents' marriage or the pressures of managing a cereal empire during wartime shortages. World War I had disrupted supply chains, making it hard to source ingredients for post-products, and Eleanor, even as a child, would have sensed the stress rippling through the household. Family portraits from the time, such as one painted around 1915, showing Marjorie with her daughters, Adelaide and Eleanor in matching dresses, capture the innocence of those early years. Eleanor, with her wide eyes and curls, posed elegantly beside her mother. But the divorce of her parents in 1917, when she was just 8, cast a shadow. It meant splitting time between homes and adjusting to her mother's new marriage to Hutton in 1920, which brought even more grandeur, but also step-sibling dynamics later on. Despite the privileges, like private tutors, yacht outings on the family's vessels, and winters in Palm Beach at Mar-a-Lago, these experiences taught Eleanor early on about the fragility of family bonds, shaping her into a young woman who valued connection amid the isolation that wealth can sometimes bring. Hillwood itself became a symbol of that era. After Marjorie sold it in 1951, it transformed into part of Long Island University's C.W. Post campus, where the mansion now serves as administrative offices, preserving a piece of Eleanor's childhood history for students today. By the time she turned 18 in 1927, Eleanor was ready for her big entrance into society. Her debutante ball was a highlight of the season, a glittering event attended by the who's who of New York elite, held likely at a prestigious venue like the Ritz-Carlton or a family estate, where hundreds of guests mingled under crystal chandeliers. Debuts like hers were more than parties. They were rituals signaling that a young woman was now eligible for marriage and ready to take her place in high society, a tradition rooted in European courts, but adapted to American high society with a touch of jazz-age flair. Guests would have arrived in formal attire, men in tails and top hats, women in beaded gowns, dancing under chandeliers to jazz bands, playing the latest tunes from Duke Ellington or George Gershwin, while Eleanor, in a stunning gown, curtsied and smiled through the nerves. Her dress for such an occasion, preserved in the Hillwood Museum collection, was an exquisite evening ensemble from 1927, a sleeveless sheath of silver lame and chiffon, adorned with intricate beadwork in geometric patterns, typical of the Art Deco style, featuring godets at the knees for ease of movement during dances like the Charleston. It fastened with snaps at the hip and came with a matching cape of sheer chiffon, adding an air of ethereal elegance. Newspaper accounts from the time, such as those in the New York Times, noted similar debuts that season, with throngs of society figures attending balls for heiresses like Evelyn Clark or others, highlighting the competitive social calendar. For Eleanor, it was a moment of excitement but also pressure, as society expected her to make a good match soon after, perhaps a banker, industrialist, or titled European, while whispers of her family's wealth made her a prime target for suitors. This event marked her transition from sheltered girl to socialite, introducing her to a world of charity galas, theater openings, and transatlantic voyages that would define her young adulthood. The following year, 1928, brought an even more thrilling experience. Eleanor was presented at Buckingham Palace to King George V and Queen Mary. Traveling to London aboard a luxurious ocean liner like the RMS Mauritania, she would have prepared meticulously for weeks, learning the proper curtsy, a deep, graceful dip lasting several seconds, and protocol for meeting royalty, including how to address the monarchs and navigate the rigid etiquette of the British court. Imagine the thrill of standing in that historic hall with its gold-leafed ceilings, marble columns, and rows of dignitaries in military uniforms and tiaras, her heart racing as she approached the throne in an elegant dress, perhaps a flowing white gown adorned with pearls from the family collection, complete with long gloves and a feathered headdress, as was customary for debutantes at court presentations. According to reports in Time magazine from the time, Eleanor, listed as Miss Eleanor Postclose Hutton, was among a select group of American heiresses presented during the final courts of the season, alongside others like Mrs. John North Willys. The event was a grand affair, with the king and queen seated on thrones, receiving curtsies from young women from around the world, symbolizing their entry into global elite circles. This royal encounter not only boosted her social standing, earning mentions in international society pages, and solidifying her status as a transatlantic figure, but also gave her a taste of international glamour, setting the stage for her future connections to Europe. It was a pinnacle of pre-Depression excess where American wealth met old-world aristocracy, and for Eleanor, it sparked a lifelong affinity for European culture, from French art to Swiss residences later in life. But Eleanor's life quickly turned toward romance, and it wasn't always smooth. At just 20 years old, in 1930, she made a bold move by eloping with Preston Sturges, a charismatic playwright and director who was making waves in Hollywood's early days. Sturges, 11 years her senior, was known for his witty scripts, like the Broadway hit Strictly Dishonorable, and larger-than-life personality, blending intellectual charm with a bohemian flair that contrasted sharply with Eleanor's polished upbringing. Their whirlwind romance led them to tie the knot on April 12th in a secret ceremony, perhaps at a quiet chapel or justice of the peace in New York, defying conventions and scandalizing her family, especially her mother Marjorie, who had envisioned a grand society wedding. It felt like something out of a movie, young love defying conventions, with headlines in the New York Times announcing the elopement despite objections, painting it as a dramatic front-page story of heiress rebellion. However, problems surfaced almost immediately, as differences in lifestyle and perhaps Sturges' ongoing entanglements emerged. By 1932, Eleanor filed for an annulment on May 12th in New York's Supreme Court, arguing that Preston hadn't fully divorced his first wife, Estelle de Wolfe Mudge, making their marriage invalid from the start. This caused a stir in society gossip columns, with outlets like the Times reporting the suit in detail, portraying Eleanor as either a victim of deception or a hasty romantic who acted impulsively amid the economic uncertainties of the early Great Depression. The annulment was granted, ending the union after just 2 years, but not without leaving emotional scars and public scrutiny. These tales, rich with themes of ambition, sacrifice, and family drama, inspired Sturges to write the screenplay for his 1933 film, The Power and the Glory, a story of a ruthless railroad magnate's rise and fall that mirrored elements of the Post legacy. Sold to producer Jesse Lasky for $17,500, a significant sum during the Depression. The film starred Spencer Tracy in a non-linear narrative structure, told in flashbacks from the protagonist's funeral that later influenced Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. It became a critical and commercial hit, praised for its innovative storytelling, and showcased how Eleanor's personal insights quietly influenced Hollywood, even if she stayed behind the scenes, preferring privacy over the limelight. This brief marriage, though turbulent, left a cultural footprint, blending her heritage with cinematic history in ways that few knew were rooted in her own shared memories. Not one to dwell on setbacks, Eleanor moved forward with determination. In 1933, amid the depths of the Great Depression, when millions were out of work and breadlines stretched through cities, she married Etienne Marie Robert Gautier. Gautier was a star in the world of polo, a sport favored by the upper class, and he was also the grandson of the mayor of Compiègne, a historic town in France. Their wedding took place on April 5th in the charming chapel of Église Saint-Philippe du Roule in Paris, a romantic setting with stained glass windows and elegant architecture. It was a union that blended American wealth with European nobility, but it didn't last. The marriage dissolved after just a few months, perhaps due to cultural differences or the economic strains of the time. This brief chapter gave Eleanor her first real taste of life abroad, exposing her to French culture and society, which would become a bigger part of her world later on. Returning to America, Eleanor tried again for happiness in 1934, marrying George Curtis Rand on June 4th. Rand came from a respected family. He was the son of Kobe Rand and grandson of George C. Kobe, a prominent lawyer associated with the firm Roosevelt and Kobe, yes, connected to the famous Roosevelt family. Their life together started promisingly in a stunning New York apartment designed by Donald Deskey Associates. Deskey was the genius behind the iconic Art Deco interiors of Radio City Music Hall, and he brought that same flair to their home. Think sleek lines, chrome accents, and luxurious materials that screamed modernity in the 1930s. Today, the original blueprints for that apartment are preserved in the collections of the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum, serving as a testament to Eleanor's keen eye for beauty and design. She likely played a hands-on role in choosing fabrics and layouts, turning the space into a personal sanctuary. But beneath the surface, things weren't ideal. In 1938, Eleanor filed for divorce in Reno, Nevada, a city famous for its quick divorce mills, where unhappy couples could end marriages without long legal battles. She cited cruelty as the reason, a serious allegation in an era when divorce was still stigmatized, especially for women. This split hinted at private struggles, perhaps emotional or even physical tensions, that Eleanor kept largely hidden from the public eye. As the world plunged into World War II, with bombs falling over Europe and American factories gearing up for war production, Eleanor's life took another turn. In 1942, she married János Békésy, better known by his pen name Hans Habe. Békésy was a fascinating figure, a Hungarian-Austrian writer who had survived incredible ordeals. He was captured by the Nazis early in the war, imprisoned in a French camp, and then made a daring escape. His experiences inspired his novel, A Thousand Shall Fall, a gripping account of survival and resistance that became a bestseller. Their marriage on April 23rd brought some stability amid the global chaos, and it gave Eleanor her only child, son and tall Tony, Miklos Post-Debekesi, born in 1944. Tony's arrival was a joyous milestone. Eleanor doted on him, finding in motherhood a sense of purpose she'd long sought. However, by 1946, as the war ended and the world began rebuilding, the couple divorced. Bekesi's adventurous spirit and Eleanor's need for security may have clashed, but they co-parented Tony amicably. The post-war years were a time of reconstruction for Eleanor too, as she sought lasting stability in a changing world. In 1949, she married Owen Denny de Lagarde Johnson on August 27th in Paris, the City of Light, that was slowly recovering from occupation. Johnson was a diplomat working at the U.S. Embassy there, and he came from literary stock. His father was the renowned author Owen Johnson, known for books like The Salamander. This marriage immersed Eleanor in diplomatic circles, where she attended embassy events and mingled with the international figures. But it too ended in divorce by 1953, perhaps due to the demands of his career or personal differences. Finally, Eleanor found the enduring love she'd been searching for. Sources vary on the exact date. Some say 1954, others 1956. But she married Léon Eugene Barzin, a talented Belgian-American conductor. Barzin was a musical powerhouse. He founded the National Orchestral Association, which trained young musicians, and served as the founding musical director of the New York City Ballet, collaborating with legends like Lincoln Kirstein and choreographer George Balanchine. Their partnership was a match of minds and hearts. In 1958, they moved to Europe, settling in Switzerland, where Léon continued conducting symphonies, and Eleanor embraced a life filled with art, music, and quieter joys. This marriage lasted over 4 decades, until Léon's death in 1999 at age 98. It was the anchor Eleanor had long needed, providing companionship through travels, concerts, and shared passions. In her later years, Eleanor split her time between Fribourg, Switzerland, a picturesque town with medieval charm, and Paris, where she maintained a home filled with treasured mementos. She lived to the ripe age of 96, passing away on November 27, 2006, just days before her 97th birthday, at her Paris residence. A touching memorial service was held at her mother's Hillwood estate, museum and gardens in Washington, D.C., a place brimming with family history. Afterward, she was laid to rest in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, New York, near other notable figures, in a plot that reflected her American roots despite her European life. Eleanor's influence extends well beyond her own time, leaving lasting marks on cultural, emotional, and even political landscapes that we still experience today. Through her marriage to Léon Barzin, she supported the arts in meaningful ways. His work with the New York City Ballet helped shape modern dance, and Eleanor's presence at rehearsals and performances likely provided quiet encouragement. Her own collections of 18th century French arts bolstered institutions like Hillwood Museum, where visitors today can admire pieces she donated or inspired, preserving cultural heritage for future generations. The 2017 Sotheby's auction in Paris of her and Tony's collections, featuring fine furniture, paintings, and decorative items, raised awareness of her taste and fetched significant sums, further funding arts initiatives. Politically, Eleanor's life mirrored America's shift from isolationism to global involvement. Born during a time when the U.S. was emerging as a world power, her move to Europe in 1958 symbolized the strengthening transatlantic ties after World War II, as Americans like her built bridges through diplomacy and culture. Emotionally, she teaches us about resilience in the face of heartbreak. In an age of rigid social norms, where women were expected to marry once and stay put, Eleanor pursued love relentlessly, finally finding it in her sixth marriage. Her story reminds us of wealth's fragility. It offers comfort but doesn't protect the heart from pain. We see this in her quiet acts of kindness, like helping that homeless woman, showing that true impact comes from empathy, not bank accounts. Her legacy lives on through family. Dinah Merrill's graceful film roles, Glenn Close's powerful performances, all threads woven from Eleanor's resilient tapestry. Today, in our fast-paced world of fleeting connections, Eleanor's narrative urges us to value deep relationships and learn from failures. It highlights that significance isn't in amassed fortunes, but in the lives we touch and the lessons we pass on, encouraging kindness and perseverance. In wrapping up, Eleanor Post-Closbarzen was far more than an heiress. She was a dedicated seeker and survivor who weathered emotional storms to discover peace. Her journey prompts us to reflect on our own searches for love and purpose, gently reminding us to embrace life's contradictions with grace. Through that lens, we honor a woman who lived authentically, embracing her flaws and triumphs alike, leaving us with a sense of thoughtful closure.